So I've been editing photos on a consistent basis for almost a decade now, and in this video I want to share with you guys a complete breakdown of my work process. Now I promise I'm not going to hold anything back, and if you watch to the end I'm going to spill all the beans and share with you all of the little secrets on how I'm able to take a photo from looking like this to something like this. Alright, so welcome to Lightroom. The first thing that I usually do is to establish a crop and straighten up the photo if I need to. So up here in the corner, you click it and you can get this crop tool. If you've never been in Lightroom before, if you click O on your keyboard, you get all of these different lines that basically help you frame up the photo. And in photography, my friends, framing is everything. It's both a combination of nailing it in like when you snap the photo and also in the post-production. Now, I know that this is gonna go to Instagram, so we can go here and do 4:5 and have this aspect ratio right here. Now to straighten out the photo, you can just click auto and Lightroom is gonna automatically straighten it out. It was a little bit crooked, it's a handheld shot. And I think this here, kind of in the middle, right? I think this could be something. This is good. At least for the sake of a tutorial, we can keep it like this. Now, if I were editing this photo myself and not creating a tutorial for you guys showing you everything I do, then usually what I do is to use my presets. It's taken me years to create, and in my opinion, they're great. So we can just use this pink sunset, and like honestly, just a click of a button, it looks pretty good. But I'm here to, show you my complete work process on doing this from scratch. And by the way, this photo, you can download it in the description down below and you can edit it together, me and you, hand in hand. I think that is pretty fun, right? And smack the like button for me while I have your attention. Now let's then do this not with a preset, but if you're interested, you can get all of these presets and I'll leave them in the description down below. And I'll show you a little bit more on them later. Now the next thing that I like to do is to actually do the basic correction. Now usually I like to press the auto button here to get Lightroom does the correction, these basic correction for you. This is by no means a finished product, but it's a nice little starting point, and I usually then change it a little bit afterwards. Now here's where my workflow usually differs from many other people's I've seen, and this, when I learned this with the technique that I'm about to share with you, my photo editing just took a leap. So usually what I used to do before, once I did the basic correction, I went to the tone curve and then I did the HSL sliders, and then I went down the line. But what I like to do first is to create a bunch of masks to help shape and enhance the light of the photo. Because if you get the light right, especially of course in pre-production but also post-production, then all the other dominoes they fall just right, and it just becomes so much easier to edit everything else afterwards, and you ensure that the photo just looks good, because lighting is kind of everything when it comes to photos. So the first thing I would like to do is to open up the middle right here. So what I would probably do is to create a gradient filter like this, like so. I often like to have my feather. So this is a feather. If you press O on your keyboard, you can see this red. This is just showing you where the mask is. And if you press H, you can hide the circle. Whoops. Let me show you this later. So I usually like to have feather mine out pretty much, something like this here. Maybe even all the way, something like this. And I'm going to create quite a few of these masks. You're going to see me do them here. But open up the exposure just ever so slightly. And this is going to be a combination of a lot of different masks. Now another thing you can also do, if you press plus here again, we can create a linear gradient filter. So what a gradient filter is, if you've never seen one of these before, this is basically a mask that every change that you make here is going to start down here and then it's gradually become less and less. So if I show you in the exposure, you can see that here everything is super, all these changes, the exposure to -4 is here, then it becomes less and less and less. So my thinking here is that I want to brighten up the foreground, but I know that if I drag it like this, we're going to brighten up the sunlight here too, and I don't want to do that. I just want to brighten up the foreground. So what I'm going to do then is we do it like this. Let me see. Do it something like this here. Now this is pretty good, but as you can see, we're not hitting the houses here. So what you can do, if you press the mask, you can press plus, you can press brush tool here. You make sure to have auto mask on, and then we're just gonna brush in the rest. So what auto mask does, it just helps you keep the line so it can be a little bit sloppy. You just brush here. And if I go out of the mask, you can always hold Alt on your keyboard to get the minus. And you can have it auto mask on too here. Just go something like this here. Don't have to be too precise here. And if you want to get the tower correctly, then we need to be precise, my friends. So then just zoom in and just do it here. And it doesn't have to be all perfect. All right, so now we have a mask that is affecting the foreground. And what I want to do with it selected, I want to take up the exposure a little bit, take up the whites, the shadows a tiny bit, and take up the contrast, just like so. So already what we've done, we just opened up the middle a little bit, making it brighter. Now the next thing I want to do is to create another gradient filter like this, and I want to darken up of the first part of the foreground just a little bit, and we can zoom out here so we get it like this. Darken this. I really like this effect also. It also helps making the photos more three-dimensional, but something like this, and I think it looks this looks pretty nice. Now next thing I'm gonna do, I am actually gonna create another gradient filter, and sometimes I like to create a few of these and just take up the exposure in a few places just ever so slightly. Something like this I think is good, and sometimes I could make another one somewhere here maybe and just take the exposure just tiny bit. So what I'm creating these few spots that are a little bit more exposure on and just helping guide our eyes and then ultimately to the church. And I might actually, if for a second tutorial, I'm probably not gonna do it, but I might make a brush tool. So I just click the brush, then you're creating a brush, and I might brush the church, make it super good, whatever, and take up the exposure a little bit. Let's just do that. We're going all the way in this tutorial, so let's go all the way in and make a perfect little mask around it. And I have the auto mask on, which helps me keep it in the line, all right? And press O to see the mask here. And now with the mask selected, we can take up the exposure a little bit and up the whites. One thing I like to do when I'm opening up exposure like this is to compensate by doing a little bit of contrast. It just helps to make the things, pop a little bit more. And one thing I want to do too is to take up the clarity a little bit on the subjects like this. I think this is good. Now, what I would like to do then also is to create a brush here. And I am actually going to brush the corners a little bit, but now not with the auto mask on. So take auto mask off, and I'm going to brush the corners and darken them a little bit. And even here in the sky, just a little bit like this. All right. So creating a little vignette, and I'm going to take down the exposure a little bit and up with the contrast like this. And with these masks done, we've taken the photo from this to this, much more three-dimensional. Now, another cool little thing we can do here is to enhance the sunlight. So I am later on going to mess with the tones and make them. But first, remember, I want to get the light looking good before I start going down. So here, I'm going to create a gradient filter. And this, my friends, this is magical. So basically, I want to emphasize on the sunlight here. And by creating a gradient filter like this, and you can then play around with the feather, but I want to have it feathered out all the way, somewhere around these lines. So this is where the sunset is. And then I want to take the temperature and drag that up to the orange side. So you're basically telling Lightroom that we're going to make this part here be more more orange, because that's where the sunlight is. But what I can also do to help sell this effect is to do down the dehaze. So if I exaggerate this, basically dehaze is, it makes this really hazy and misty. But this obviously we can't do it this much, but just a little bit, and just adds a little misty effect, and then down the clarity to make this a little bit soft. The yellow orange light that is coming here is a little soft, and then I can also take the contrast a little bit up. And we can even take this a little bit more and maybe up with the tint a little bit. And this I absolutely love, and especially when we start to play around more with the colors, you're going to see that this is going to be a huge part. So for the starting, I think that the light here, the masks are pretty good, already looking like this, and we have the light source here. Now next, let's then keep going down. Now the white balance, I want to keep this photo cold, but I want to have more of the sunset colors, and then I can cool it down with the color grading later. So let's take up the temperature and see how far we can go. And I think in general, how I think about photo editing, I'm just sliding the sliders a little bit, and then I'm seeing how far I can go. And usually I do a little bit more, and then I split the difference by going a little bit back. So I see okay, this is way too much. Then we can take it down maybe to 7,000, and up with the tint here to get a little bit of magenta in, get a little bit of sunset colors. This is starting to look good. Now, these sliders, the clarity and the vibrance, I usually do afterwards, but I really like the effect of having a little bit softer image. So let's take this down to -15. It just softens the overall image and take off that digital edge. Now with the tone curve, let's just make a simple little S curve. If you've never seen a tone curve before, a little crash course. I did not mispronounce. Last time I made a video like this, I said crack course. But this is not a crack course. You don't find crack courses here. You find the crash courses on the other hand. It's really late, almost midnight where I'm here. So the crack course on this is basically the tone curve is representing the tones of the image. So up here you have the bright parts, down here you have the mid tones, and then here you have the shadows and darks down here. And the cool thing is that you can create like these nodes anywhere where you want on the line like this, and then you can move them down. So basically, if you create one here, if you move the tone below this little line that you see right here, you make it darker, and if you move it above, you make it brighter. And then as I showed you before, if you create a few of them, you can then manipulate individual places of the tone curve. So if you want to make just the highlights brighter, you can do it like this. And the reason we use this is you can be really precise and like mess with the tones in a really fun and an exciting way. At least for us like photo editing, you know, we're like we get a little bit too excited, if you know what I'm saying, when we see this. So if you double tap, then you reset it. And by the way, if you double tap on any of these sliders in Lightroom, double tap, you reset them, okay? Now, when I'm working with tone curves, I like to hold in Alt on my keyboard because it makes it move slower. So if you hold in Alt, everything becomes slow, but if you're not holding in Alt, it becomes super fast. So it's much easier to be accurate. Now, what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna raise up the shadows like to here. So what I'm doing now, if you have no idea, I'm basically crushing the shadows, making sure that they are not totally black. And this creates a little fade effect. So if I take it all the way up, you can see that everything becomes faded, but just want a little bit of fade. And then I'm gonna drag down like this, drag down the shadows. And on the opposite end, I think I might drag up. Now, one thing that I like is taking up the mid-tones, but I think for this one, do it like this and get a little film look in it by taking down the white so they're not totally white. And this is creating a beautiful little subtle contrast for us to play around with. I think this is pretty nice to start with. And the beautiful thing also with photo editing in general is that you can go back and forth, all right? Now, next thing is the color mixer. And point color is cool, but let's, for simplicity, stay with the mixer. But before we go here in the HL slider, I personally, this is my workflow, like to go down here in the calibration and get set the base tones, and then I go up to the HL sliders. Now, let's take up the red primaries to 10. Let's take up the green primaries to 35. This makes everything a little bit redder. Like super nice filmic look, I think, if I take up them. And then down with the blue primary, this is like if you want to have super teal and orange, but let's just take them to -10. I think is pretty good. Now, I want to take up the red a little bit. So red colors just to +5. We can take down the green saturation on the greens to -5. And then or you know what? I'm going to actually take down the primaries in the the blue ones, and up with the greens to around 5, and this one to around 8. And I think this is a great starting point. Before, after, it just makes it good starting point. And now, after this, I like to go to HL slider. And you know, this is honestly what is like most fun thing about Lightroom in general, is how powerful it is in changing tones. So if you take the blue tones, you can see you take more to the magenta or more to the blue, and you can just play around with it here. And you can either watch me commentate on what I'm doing, or you can just speed up here, because this is a little tedious, and I go through it, you know, one by one. So I think this is like good here. Basically, I'm just dragging every slider a little bit and seeing what it affects. That's like basically it. Then let's do the same for the saturation. I'm probably gonna take down the blue saturation a little bit, and I'm gonna reintroduce blue in the, you can see in the color grading we do in a while, but let's then take up the yellows and up with the color here on the sunset color here, bam. And this is starting to look pretty nice. There isn't a lot of purple, but this is starting to look pretty damn good. And then with the blue, the luminance, this is the brightness of each color, so you can see the blue. A really cool, like nice look that I like a lot is like taking down the blue saturation, but compensating by making them a little bit darker. And I think this is pretty pretty. Let's just see what everything does. Here you can see the sunset, take down. Now next I'm going to show you the color grading tab, and that's where a lot of the secret sauce, or like the secret salt, happens in my photo editing. And if you learn how to use that tab, you can also take your skills to the very next level. But before I do that, I want to show you my brand new preset pack. This has taken me years in the making and I'm incredibly proud of it. Now, what is here? These are over 20, like 8, I think, different presets that you can see right here, but also 8 different overlays that will speed up your workflow tremendously. So for instance, this photo here, if we go into the creative night, cold nights, bam, it's almost finished with a click of a button. Now I know that presets aren't supposed to be a one-click wonder, so how I've designed mine is that I have creative presets, and then I have these foundational presets, which ensure a baseline of tones that I can then work off, like speeding my process and just making sure that my tones are nice all the time. So for instance, on this photo, we can go down in the foundation and click the blue. Now this is not a finished product, but I have nice tones to start with, and then if you press the auto button, like already the photo went from looking like this to this with simply 2 clicks. And from here, I will start to work on the mask and do other things to the photo, just ensuring that everything looks good. And even if I'm working from here, we can take a creative preset, and I think that the rain, this is like a rainy street, and boom. With 1 click, it looks good, and now I can start to work in it from here. So if you're interested in getting similar photos like I do and speeding up your workflow tremendously, then down in the description you can find a link which like takes you to this preset pack. And I know, my friend, that you're gonna like it because I personally use it all the time and I absolutely love it. Now next is the color grading. So this might seem intimidating in the beginning, but it isn't really. This is just, it's basically just color wheels where you can push any color in the shadow, midtones and highlights, and by just dragging it like this. And you can either put it wherever you want like this, or you can take the hue right here or the saturation. All right, now I would like to reintroduce the blue. So 215 is a nice blue color, and we can have it in 22 because I want to have it pretty blue here. But the highlights, if you press here, you can get these preset colors that Lightroom has, and this one I really like for sunset. So this is a nice sunset color, and if you want to make it a little bit more warmer, we can do that. So maybe 35, and then take it down just ever so slightly. And then the midtones, I don't think for this photo we need to have any midtones. We just do it like this. But the shadows, I want to have a little bit bluer here. And this is where a lot of magic happens. And then you can also take down the luminance. I think we can easily add a more contrast here. And with the luminance here, take it up a tiny bit in the midtones and highlights. Yeah, we can take them up a tiny bit. And then the blending, this is just blending the colors in better. And then the balance slider, basically if you drag the balance slider to the right, you're making the changes to the highlights more dominant. And if you take it down, you're making the blues or the, like what you did to the shadows, whatever colors that you choose. So let's take it down just ever so slightly. Now next is the sharpening. I personally like to sharpen my photos a tiny bit, but I also like to have this masking. So basically what you're doing here is that I'm simply, like, if you hold an Alt on a keyboard, you can see what this is affecting. So everything that is white, now the entire photo is affected by the sharpening slider, but I just want to sharpen the highlights. So maybe around 75. Now everything that is white is just being sharpened, or 80 maybe, 85. And then it just makes everything as it doesn't have to be sharpened soft, and just sharpens the edges and the subjects and whatnot. I like this a whole lot. Then this here, the noise slider, this is so good. It's basically like this AI tool with just a click of a button. Lightroom removes noise and digital noise and everything, making everything much prettier. So see here, this is before, a lot of these like noise colors in it, but taking like this and it's just gone, enhance. Magic, you know? All right, next we have the effects tab that I'm gonna play with. So I like to add a little vignette. We can maybe take it quite a heavy vignette of this, I think would be nice, but we can feather it out just a little bit. And then the grain, I'm a sucker for grain, so I'm gonna take it up. This just makes everything grainy, a little bit more filmic. And now if you press Y on your keyboard, you can see the before and after, and it's starting to like take on a good shape. Now what I would like to do now is that I would probably like make the vignetting a little bit less hard, something like this. And then I think that the blue is a little bit too towards the turquoise, so I'm going to take the aquas and move them a little bit up. And then let's see, we can move this maybe to 0, something like this. Here, I would then probably take down the highlights ever so slightly and up the contrast. I think we can easily up the contrast a little bit. And now I would probably play again with the mask. So here, this mask that we made, I think you can easily make this a little bit warmer. And a cool little trick here that if you warm up this, what is a really nice trick is to play around then with the opposite colors. So here we are warming up. We can even make this a little bit bigger. So here we're getting the sunset colors in, but on the opposite end of the spectrum is blue from orange. So we can take up here and make this part of the photo much, much cooler. And even, because this is ice, we could even take a brush and brush the entire ice here, like this, and then take down the blue to make it like this is obviously too much, but just ever so slightly, and it becomes much, much, much bluer. Now, the last two things I like to do, and this is honestly what took my photo editing to the very next level, is one, I like to first now go through all the sliders. What do I like to do? And just reassuring that everything is looking nice. Maybe a little bit more magenta, a little bit more contrast we can easily get here. Maybe I want to make the tone curves a little bit better and spend more time on every single place and just trying to get the best possible photos. Now, another thing I would personally like to do to this photo right here is to soften it up and creating this dreamy glow effect. And this I do really simply. If you go down here in my preset pack and you see this overlay dreamy glow, just click it and boom, you can see the entire photo like before and after becomes, I love this. It just becomes really glowy and beautiful, and you create these like film halations everywhere. So the highlights just become bloomy, and this is just super, super pretty. Now, the last thing that I do, and if there is just one thing that you could take away from this video, then I hope it would be this, because when I started doing this, it honestly made my photo editings a whole lot better. And that is when I'm finished, or when I think that I'm finished, then I make sure that I stand up and take a break and rest my eyes, because I've been looking at this edit a whole lot, and when I just do something else, come back in an hour or two, I have fresh pair of eyes and I can easily then spot if there is something that is like I was too excited and somewhere and went way too overboard and it's just over edited crap, so I can correct that by taking a little break, coming back with a fresh pair of eyes and be like, that was definitely a little bit too much, or maybe a little too less, and I go something, do a little bit more. Now, with all that being said though, if you want to take your photo editing skills to the very next level fast, then my friend, you need to watch this video next and learn these 15 tricks that the professionals know that amateurs simply don't.